Happy Thursday afternoon. Thank you for tuning in for another wonderful Thirsty Thursday conversation with some members of the Maryland Distillers Guild. My name's Jim Bachman. I'll be moderating our talk today and kind of guiding you through the story of Maryland rum. There is a notable distillery that is not joining us this afternoon. They had another conflict of scheduling. It is Lion Rum. We would love to have them as part of this conversation, but it didn't work out. But please go back and watch the Lion Rum conversation that we had with Jamie a few months back on Thirsty Thursday. It is up on our Facebook page and also on YouTube, so you can always go back and refer to that. It is Maryland Spirits Month. Please go out and show your support for your favorite local distillery. You can do that by buying Maryland Spirits at your favorite local retailer. If you're in Montgomery County, the 28 Montgomery County liquor stores are doing great things with Maryland Spirits this month. They've got a great discount program running, and they're featuring all Maryland-made products. So please go and talk to them about those, or visit your favorite local distillery and purchase directly from them. Many of them have the ability to do curbside pickup. Call ahead, order ahead online, do whatever you need to do, but show your support for these great businesses. There have been a couple of updates made by the governor in a few localities regarding what's allowed and not allowed in terms of the number of people on premise and things like that. Go to marylandspirits.org. We've got a COVID-19 update on there, and it has a whole list of guidelines that are expected. You've got to wear your mask. You've got to stay socially distant. But while doing all of those great things to keep your community safe, please show your support for these businesses this month. We appreciate it. And each of these businesses is doing a great job to make sure that you are happy, safe, and able to come back. Without further ado, I'm joined by Crystal at Puerto Rico Distillery.
Hey there.
Dan from Miscellaneous.
Afternoon.
And Charlie with Old Line Spirits. Thank you all very much for being this afternoon.
Thanks for having us.
Today's conversation is going to be about rum. We've been doing kind of a weekly roundtable where we're talking about spirits that are very popular here in the state of Maryland. We started with gin. We had several distilleries on to talk about what they're doing and what their modern approach to gin is all about. We kind of talked last week. Dan was on that call about the resurgence of Maryland rye and what whiskey means to the state. And now we're going to talk about the spirit that kind of paved the way for spirits in the state, and that is rum. Very simply, I'll give a definition, and it is fermented juice from sugarcane, and then you move on from there and you make really kick-ass products. So who can kind of guide us through a little bit of the history of it? I've got a little fact that I just found on Wikipedia that's kind of neat, but does anybody have like a quick and dirty history of this wonderful spirit? Uh-oh. Dan, you muted yourself.
Well, I always do that. Go for it, Charlie.
Okay, so I'll give it a shot. In the colonies, molasses and rum was a big part of the triangle trade, with slaves being brought over from Africa, molasses being brought up from the West Indies, and both of those products being sold pretty heavily in the colonies. So rum has been in the United States and in the Western Hemisphere for a really long time. There are a lot of varieties of rum. Every one is a little bit different. I've been accused of having a promiscuous palate, so I like them all. There's everything from the Caribbean rums, some of the real funky stuff that you can get out of Jamaica. We have Caribbean rum that we get from the Dominican Republic at Old Line Spirits, and that's a little more smooth and clean tasting. And then lately, so this is my segue to the Maryland guys who are actually doing it. Lately, there have been a number of distilleries opening up in the mid-Atlantic, down to North Carolina with Kill Devil, Lions in St. Michael's, the two guests that we have on today, making really, really fine mid-Atlantic rum, which does have a different flavor profile, and it does have a different character than the rums that come from South America, or the rums that come from Central America, or come from the Caribbean basin. So that's my knowledge, and we're done.
I like it. We're very fortunate today because Crystal's brand is actually very traditional for what's going on in the Caribbean, and they've brought that style here to Maryland, of all places, to share with everybody. So we're really going to have a great kind of conversation about how rum can be appreciated from different perspectives and from different styles and let's call it an upbringing for the spirit itself. Yeah, I was tooling around a little bit on Wikipedia earlier today. Didn't realize that this was something that has roots in stories dating back all the way to the 7th century. You know, in the Middle East and in and around Turkey and Greece. Very, very interesting stuff, because my expectation was that it was all kind of an explosion that came out of the idea that these Europeans were colonizing the Americas. And I had no idea that there was a history prior to that that may have been, well, not the same exact spirit, something similar influencing to what they were bringing here. So that's great. Let's talk a little bit about kind of what the modern rum world looks like, because I think that really has its roots in what Charlie was talking about, the colonial period and kind of the trade that was happening here. It seems like molasses, sugar sources seem to be the crucial thing here. And we're fortunate here in Maryland. I know many of our distillers work closely with Domino Sugar to source local sugar for their products. How do we think that the sugar came to this area because there was a demand for it because of rum production in the early ages of this as a colony, or was this something that just came out of being an easy place to locate a port that could handle sugar refinement? Any idea?
I imagine the port aspect has a lot to do with it. Looking at sugar cane plantations and history as a whole, you know, you did mention the colonial aspect to it, and anytime that you are seeing a plantation, you're going to likely find a still to help handle the byproduct of it. And so, you know, as globalization comes into effect, you know, the ports become much more of a player that in that aspect. So that, I think, is a very likely good guess.
And I mean, that molasses was used as a currency. Then the rum that was turned in, you know, that was the rum that was created out of the molasses was used as a currency. So, you know, you just had this bartering system. And even, you know, past 16, 17, 1800, you know, you have the British Navy and, you know, General Washington, they're using rum as currency for their soldiers and giving them extra rations and making sure everybody is nice and, I don't want to say inebriated, but happy, you know, and that's rum is a happy spirit. That's kind of the takeaway here, that everybody needs a little bit of rum to get through their day. Maybe
they were more amenable to marching orders and determinations that they may not have agreed with before.
And freezing their butts off and, you know, all that kind of stuff. So
yeah, there you go. Hey, we need you to just like relax a little bit and go out there and do what you need to do.
Yeah.
And when you get done doing a hard day's work, you can settle down and have something great to drink.
Absolutely.
It helps
it's always a good motivator, isn't it? Oh, at the end of this day, I get to go and have a nice drink. That'll be great. So I guess I'm kind of curious for Maryland distilleries, we have this great explosion of kind of diversity in terms of what distilleries are producing. So we have members making everything from, you know, vodka to absinthe to all these great cordials. And obviously you're going to have the foundational spirits there. But why does it seem like there are so many Maryland distilleries that are focused on rum or have an appreciation for rum? From my perspective, working behind a bar in the past, rum was one thing. It was always clear. It had a bearded captain standing on it. And there was nothing really exciting or intriguing about it. Now, looking at what you guys are producing and looking around at what our producers in the state are making, these are really intriguing spirits, and they're really approachable. And they also are very complex when you start to try them and explore them a little bit more. So is this like a hidden thing that distillers are into? Is rum like some hidden gem, or is it something that everybody kind of wishes to pursue?
I think we all want to get away from that bearded captain. You know, there's this misconception by so many drinkers that that's all that rum is the bearded captain or the bat. And we're just not those things. We can't be, whittled down into that little category when you can see rum is made in Indonesia different than it's made in Brazil, different than it's made in Puerto Rico, different than it's made in, Germany. It's just such a great, unique spirit. And the fact that we want to get a unique perspective that's our taste that we think everybody else will enjoy, that we can create it and craft it and get it into their hands locally is what kind of motivates me, and I think some of the other producers in the state.
Yeah, I look at it as I only do rum, and I really only have an interest in doing rum. Looking at some of the other styles, I see the others as a little intimidating to me. So I think when if someone is new to the industry, then I can see how rum would be a much more forgiving spirit to try to learn the ropes. So I see it as a forgiving spirit, but also something that can be elevated. And when I'm looking at it from like a cultural and a tradition and historical type of perspective. But so I think that some of the newer distilleries that you're seeing are coming from that angle. Some of them are coming from a more experimental angle. But I think that there's a lot of diversity and dexterity that comes into play with rum.
Well, sort of tagging on to that comment about the diversity, a lot of small distilleries really need to focus on one thing when they're starting out. And bourbon is pretty well saturated, right? There's a lot of bourbon out there. There are some great rye whiskeys being made in the state of Maryland. I wouldn't say that it's saturated yet, but that's going to get there. But the other thing is that if you're we make American single malt whiskey. That's our flagship product. We have aged Caribbean rum that we bring up from the Dominican Republic. We wanted to add that as a complement to our whiskey line. We wanted to have something that we could sell, pay the bills while the whiskey was sitting in the barrels for months and months and months and years to getting good. And then we've always had this vision that we would merge our whiskey profile and our rum profile, and we're getting into that now. But more to my point, there are a lot of rules about bourbon. There are a lot of rules about rye whiskey. There are fewer rules about American single malt, but there still are some rules. Has to be one grain, has to be one distillery. Rum, I've had rum made from sugar beets, and it was delicious. It was Austrian. It was really high proof. It was delicious. There aren't that many rules about rum, and that gives our distillers the opportunity then to sort of tap into their creativity and say, what can I do with this? That's my thought on it from a real pragmatic perspective, right? You don't have as many rules to follow, and you can get your product out there and bring some people into the spirit.
I think some of that barrier to entry that you're talking about in terms of, the lead time and the rules or the construct of what the spirit must be, I think that harkens quite a bit back to what Crystal just said about the dexterity you have with rum and the ability to kind of find a sugar source and use that to create a great spirit. And to your point, Crystal, I think we're going to go a lot more in depth about it when we start talking about what each of your businesses individually are doing. You talked about kind of the mindset you have and what you're thinking about when you're bringing your spirits to the table. But one of the things that I was most compelled by when we visited you was the way that you guys use your spirit as the launching point for all of these flavor experiences that tell your story. And it's neat to see how culturally that's how it's done. And when we look at how other rums are made in the state, they're usually made with a final taste in mind. It seems like yours is our goal is to give you the platform to do what you want. Mm-hmm. Kind of a very interesting thing. So maybe that's a good segue to maybe tell us a little bit about what you guys are doing at Puerto Rico Distillery, and then we can kind of go around the horn and talk about the approach that everybody else has.
Absolutely. Yeah, we specialize hyper focused on a particular style of rum known on the island of Puerto Rico as pitorro. So the tradition on the island and pitorro dates back, it's documented as early as 1797. And it is, a tradition that's based heavily on infusions, macerations. So behind me, I have a few examples of flavors that we have come out with. When we first started, we had our unblended, which generationally my great-grandfather would have drank it straight. He would have been, it's a heavily rooted in agricultural, families and culture. So my great-grandfather and his generation would have been working in the fields, had a hard day, want to cut straight to the punch and take the edge off. And my grandfather's generation, my abuelo, came up with this recipe of, raisins and prunes. My dad added cranberries. And so that's kind of where we're going in terms of honoring and recognizing the tradition of it. My dad's generation started doing other flavors, almonds, coconut, coffee. So ultimately, when you actually go on the island, and that's kind of what we're trying to replicate here, is we want people to do their own infusions. So we'll teach you, we'll communicate, email back and forth, because that is the tradition on the island. You go to a party and other people are bringing their bottles, and it's kind of like going to a home brewing, get together where everybody's bringing their bottles of beer. And so that's that same type of mentality that is rooted in Puerto Rico, but based in rum. So
can I interrupt real quick?
Oh, go ahead.
I want to come to one of those bottle shares. That sounds like a hell of a time.
I mean, that was obviously pre-COVID. But yeah.
I heard rum can kill COVID. If you pour it right on there.
Yeah. So yeah, that's pretty much what we got into. Our focus is, family, culture, tradition, and everything else branches off from that.
Very cool. I like this approach to kind of give the ownership and creativity to the folks that are coming in and supporting you and purchasing your bottles. You've given them an opportunity to be engaged and be a part of the story that they're telling when they try the spirit. Absolutely.
For some people, they've been to the island, they know what pitorro tastes like, so they come and they're asking, is this the real deal? It's one thing to put a name on a bottle and call it pitorro, but is this going to pass the sniff test, the taste test? And for other people, it's their first time experiencing it. Either way, we want to honor that and make that as much of an experience that it either transports you to the island, or we bring the island to you, COVID compliant.
Dan, what are you guys doing at Miscellaneous with rum? I know that rum is a big fascination for you, and that you've been challenging yourself to make excellent rum products since you opened. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're doing?
Yeah, it was actually the first product we started with was our white rum. We call it Risky Rum. And the goal was, like you had mentioned before, using local inputs whenever we could. But since sugarcane is not grown this far north, we went ahead and partnered with Domino Sugar over in Baltimore Harbor. We got our blackstrap molasses and dark brown sugar from them. And then we created our white rum based off that. So this is our Risky Rum. This is 40%, 80 proof. And we've been making this since December of 2016 in-house. And it's kind of the base ingredients of blackstrap and dark brown sugar in a 50-50 ratio with a champagne yeast that gives us a nice, ester profile and everything. We distill it twice, first on a hybrid column still with 2 plates, and then second in a pot still to finish it off and make our cuts. So we get just something that's approachable and easy to drink. Mix is fantastic as a daiquiri or whatever you want a white rum for. And the idea was, we were taking a risk on ourselves, you're taking a risk on us. So we named it Risky Rum. And we being my wife and partner, Meg, loves alliteration. So you see that through a lot of our naming profiles. From there, we took some of that white rum and we went into our Dew Point rum. And in doing that, we have this nice golden color. And to achieve that, we use a charred oak spiral with 5 gallons of the spirit at a time for 2 months to kind of basically steep the spirit in the oak and draw those colors and flavors out of it. So we get a different flavor profile, and we also bottle this at 50% alcohol or 100 proof. And this is more of a bartender's spirit where they can use it in something like a Mai Tai and really keep that flavor profile in the cocktail without diluting it too much with something that was like 40%. And from there, we started aging our spirit in new white American oak, which is atypical for rum production. Generally, you're looking at used barrels, used bourbon barrels or what have you, to age a rum. But we decided that with something that was already kind of very bold and flavorful, we wanted to pair it with something else that was going to give it a lot of color, depth, and flavor as well, and mellow it out just a little bit. So we went with our Poppy's Finest rum, and that's my great-grandfather, Poppy, Henry Poppy McAvoy, so the whole family called him Poppy. And he was born in the States, but then moved to Cuba at age 2, lived there until he was imprisoned in '59 by Castro, and then when they finally released him about 5 years later, he ended up in Puerto Rico as well, and lived out the rest of his life there. So we honor him by naming the spirit after him, but this barrel interaction is able to give us this kind of dark, deep color. We don't add any other coloring to it, so what you see is all just straight from the barrel color that's pulled out of the charred oak, and gives a really dark kind of sea salt, dark chocolate profile to something. And that Poppy's was something that when I wanted to start a distillery, I really wanted to have a sipping rum, and that was the goal from the get-go. So to design a white rum that could be drank neat if we needed it to all the way into something that once it's been aged in new white American oak to still be approachable even at 50% alcohol, 100 proof. It's still just, what I was going for was something that had a different profile than what you were going to find anywhere else in the world, but still made locally.
That's I think a wonderful way to honor somebody in your family and tell that story with the Poppy's Finest. That's really cool.
Thanks.
You mentioned earlier you really like your approach to making the white rum that you're making, mm-hmm. and you like the ester profile that it's putting off. Is that something that you're getting from the sugar source, or is that an ester profile you're getting from yeast during fermentation?
That's the yeast from fermentation. That's it's the base ingredients interacting with those yeast, and the time that you're interacting with them, the temperatures that you're letting them ferment at. Those all create the different esters.
So that ester is fermentation driven and not just ingredient driven.
Correct.
Mash or something like that. Okay, cool. And Charlie, what's going on at Old Line? What was you kind of laid it out that the primary objective was to be a whiskey distillery, but you're making these wonderful rums. Can you tell us a little bit about them?
Sure. So our flagship product is an American single malt whiskey, but our two founders being retired Navy pilots, and we wanted to have something else in the lineup to complement our whiskey, they decided to add an aged Caribbean rum. When they were getting started, they didn't see many aged Caribbean rums in the marketplace around here in Baltimore. So they thought that was an opportunity to fill a niche. We worked with a master blender for about a year to get just the profile that we wanted for our flagship rum. We bottled it at 84 proof. That's our regular aged Caribbean rum. And then we also bottled it at 114 proof, which is Navy strength. And so we've got those two going on. The profile is, it has all of the flavor notes that you would expect from an aged Caribbean rum. It's between 7 and 11 years old. all the rum in the blend has been aged in used bourbon barrels in the Dominican Republic. So all that time in a used bourbon barrel pulls out a lot of really nice color, a lot of really nice flavor notes that are just inherent in the wood. And then we just end up with a real clean product that's good for sipping. And it's also versatile for any one of the traditional rum cocktails that you might want to make. The 114 proof, the Navy strength, that's what I use for a dark and stormy. And then the 84 proof rum is just a nice backyard sipper. What we've been able to do since we've been open is now take some of the rum that we get and age it in our used whiskey barrels. So our whiskey barrels start out as first use American white oak. Single malt whiskey has to go in first use barrels. But after those barrels are done, they're still wet. They've absorbed some of the whiskey into the wood, and we put our rum in it and let it age for about a year. And that was our cask finished aged Caribbean rum. So the maltiness of the whiskey sort of takes a little bit of the sweet edge off of the rum. And I describe it as the rum for whiskey drinkers. I've worked any number of farmers markets where a customer will come by and say, "Oh, I don't like rum. I'm a whiskey drinker." And I say, "Well, try this," and they carry it home. And then after we've had those barrels used once for whiskey, then used for rum, now they've absorbed some of that rum, and we've gone ahead and put our American single malt whiskey back into those barrels and let it age for another year. And we are now calling that plus our aged, our whiskey finished rum. That's sort of our double oak lineup. They've been aged and finished twice in oak barrels. Both of them are now bottled at 100 proof, ridiculously sippable at 100 proof. And that's where we're going now. We really still want to focus on whiskey. That's what we produce at our distillery. But having the rum and having the used rum barrels gives us an opportunity to put a real nice finish into our American single malt whiskey that'll make it stand out a little bit in the single malt whiskey market that is beginning to get a little more crowded.
I think it's great that you kind of have the opportunity to in-house generate finishes for each of the spirits through your work. You have the ability to create a whiskey finish for the rum, apparently, and then you can kind of reverse engineer it and create a rum finish for the whiskeys. Is kind of cool. Mm-hmm. I have to say I tend to lean towards
and
whiskey.
The rum that we get in.
Go ahead. I think we had a little bit of
we got
catch.
Plenty of whiskey, Jim. Yeah, the last thing I was going to say, just a couple of little quick points. We've been beating up on the captain a little bit. The story that I've heard, a guy who claims that he was involved with Seagram's Distilling in Halethorpe, where the Guinness Brewery is right now. Captain Morgan was invented by Seagram, and it may have been invented in Baltimore. So if you go down to the brewery, you'll see some old artifacts and you'll see some little Captain Morgan signs around there. So as much as we pick on it, I mean, I don't care for it all that much. It's not my gig, but a lot of jobs, a lot of economic activity in Baltimore because of the captain. You know, here's to the captain. And the last thing is our rum comes to us at 130 proof. We put it down to 114 for the Navy strength. We proof it down to 84 for our traditional rum. But I've tasted it at 130 proof because I've got a promiscuous palate. And it's pretty drinkable at 130 proof. So that just tells you what aging for a long time in the Caribbean in used bourbon barrels can do to a fine base spirit. That's my story.
I was simply going to piggyback on your comment about what you hear from consumers when you're out engaging with them. And I have a palate that tends to be more preferential to things that are drier, and I really like a lot of really robust whiskeys. And I have found recently that the approach that craft distilleries are taking with rum is very appealing to me. It's not the sweet, candy, syrupy stuff that I experienced when I was coming of age, let's say, because I may have been drinking it before I was old enough to drink. But it's not that same experience. It's something that's a lot more refined. There's complexity to it, and there's something to appreciate about really getting to explore the depth of flavor that you get here. And it's not just a singular note. I guess that's all I'm trying to convey, is that I see, as a whiskey drinker and as somebody who has always found that complexity to be intriguing, I find the craft rums to be something that I'm much more compelled to try and interested in learning more about. So I don't know that there's a whole lot to talk about in terms of innovation. I think I tried to bring that up a couple of weeks ago during one of these, like, what can we do to innovate in the industry? People were like, what do you mean? We're distilling spirits. Like, unless there's going to be some huge overhaul to how you can distill or operate a still, nothing much is going to happen. But what do we see kind of as far as the consumers asking for? Canned cocktails are becoming a big thing. Do we see the consumer like pushing the approach to rum in one direction or another?
I mean, I think we're still working on the education piece with rum. It goes back to what you're saying. Your palate is more driven toward whiskey, and you just want to see people be introduced to rum as an actual possibility, because their previous education was, like you said, maybe before they were even supposed to be drinking. So they don't know that rum can have an incredible profile like we've all been talking about. So, the biggest, innovation is just going to be that kind of light bulb that goes above the consumer's head and says, oh my God, this is rum? I had no idea.
Charlie, it sounded like you were gonna say something. I want to give you the opportunity.
I did have a question, both.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so both for Dan and Crystal, is your fermentation closed? Do you use closed fermentation tanks, or do you use any kind of open fermentation?
We do all open.
We've been doing closed.
So let's talk a little bit about why you would bring that up and why that might be important.
Open fermentation. Well, we do all closed, but I've had some Jamaican rum that is really good and really funky, and it's open fermentation tank. So you have the yeast that you've pitched in. Dan, you'll straighten me out if I get this wrong, but whatever yeast happens to be in your vicinity will wander in and affect the profile.
Absolutely, and that's kind of why we're never really concerned about somebody copycatting us, because at the end of the day, as soon as I move out of this facility, my rum profile might change slightly. I won't have those same natural yeast incubating into that same batch. So, at that point, we're going to start pulling a little bit more of samples from this facility, taking them with us, inoculating, and being able to, or not inoculating, propagating rather, and being able to replicate our profile based on that. But if I gave you my exact recipe and you took it to Australia and tried to replicate it, you're not going to have the exact same results, because you're going to have different wild yeast introducing themselves into your open air fermentation.
I was just going to ask if you were going to start laying petri dishes and propagate.
We will when we start growing out of this facility.
Yeah, I think that same reasoning is why we do close, because although rum is pretty the rules, we have a very focused target we're trying to hit. So we are very controlling of all the variables, whether it's temperature, wild yeast, all that, to be able to hit that palate that for us equals Piporro. So for us, we have to be control freaks.
I think it must be difficult for you, Crystal, because you really are trying to hit a very narrow line. There are some very interesting flavor expressions in your product that you don't find in other rums or in other comparable products necessarily, at least they're being produced locally. So
Yeah, flavor love.
You can't have anything cloud that. So I think that not having control over it would really be a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's interesting. I never thought of open air fermentation for distilled spirits. I figured everything just went into a fermenter and got handled in a closed environment. But, you know, I come from a beer background, and open fermentation and cool ship handling, all of those things are very important for giving like a fingerprint almost to some of the best beers that have been produced in Belgium and Germany and the Czech Republic. And you see a lot of American breweries doing the same thing now. Just this idea of allowing the local environment to have a say in what's happening is crucial. So that's pretty cool. I'm glad to learn that that's something that you guys are doing, Dan.
Yep.
Yeah, and we do it with our whiskeys as well.
Is that a common thing? I think the only place I've seen an open fermenter and I've noticed it was at Tobacco Barn.
In the state, I don't know how common it is. I mean, I'm thinking back to my traveling around days, and most fermentations were probably closed except for Woodford. Woodford Reserve was an open fermentation. I'm pretty sure Todd out at Leopold Brothers also does open air fermentation. So, you know, it's spotty as to where it's actually. You know who else I think does it in the state is Scott at Patapsco.
Okay.
But don't quote me on that, because it's been a little while and I've been drinking.
I'm going to say,
yeah, but I mean, back to the point that. But back to the point that Crystal made earlier about the control. A lot of the bigger whiskey distilleries, the ones that have been around for a while, they've got a flavor profile that people are familiar with, that they're used to, and they expect, and they have to control that to a fairly well. Otherwise, they're going to scare off their consumer base. It's like Budweiser. Budweiser is made in these massive breweries in a whole bunch of different places, and every Budweiser that you open in this country tastes exactly the same because they're controlling every act of it. And the open fermentation gives Dan the opportunity then to sort of experiment with what's floating around out there, and he gets a sense of what that yeast profile is. But open fermentation, it's kind of it would be a crapshoot to some extent.
Definitely a wild card.
And I think you see it a lot in the Caribbean, though. And I'd have to, once COVID lifts, I think I'll start popping around the Caribbean a bit more. But I think you see a lot more of the open air fermentations around the islands, because there wasn't a whole lot of controls on that early on, and what worked, so they just kept that process going. So
Dan, with that open air approach, do you see any kind of like seasonal variation in
right?
maybe
And the other thing is that.
Sorry, I stepped all over you, man.
Another thing is those distilleries in the Caribbean have been around for a really long time, and so just like the lambics that are lambic beers that are brewed by or Belgian beers that are brewed by monks, they've been brewing that stuff for hundreds of years, and they know what the local yeast profile is like. The distilleries down in the Caribbean, most of them have been there for a really, really, really long time, and they know what the local yeast is and what it does. So I hadn't really thought about that, Dan, until you brought it up, and then I started connecting dots, and it makes all the sense in the world.
I don't know if you were able to hear my question while Charlie and I were battling for bandwidth.
I got about half of it. Go ahead.
I'm curious if you are noticing any variation, like either seasonally or kind of, over time based on what might be happening in the environment and what's making an impact on your spirit.
We see seasonal variations just with the times and the temperatures. With winter, we're in a non-conditioned space, so we're constantly kind of keeping those fermentations at a temperature range. And in the summer, we're again still non-conditioned, so we have to keep them cooler. We don't get much variation with the yeast profile. The yeast are crazy adaptive at that, and as soon as they are just constantly floating in the air, as soon as they are introduced into that warm, moist environment, they're just going to propagate themselves anyway. So we don't really see a difference in that profile with that regard. But we do have to make sure that we're keeping those times, temperatures, and conditions consistent throughout the year when doing the fermentation. So if we just let them go and it's 20 degrees out and it's about 40 degrees inside, we're not going to get that same flavor profile as if we did it in the summer.
Well, we're kind of nailing into like a little bit more technical area than we've gone with most of these other talks, but this is very intriguing to me because of the background that I come from. The control over yeast capacity and what you're keeping in your environment is very, very crucial to what your operation is going to look like. What fears are there with open air fermentation and kind of contaminants like lactobacillus and Brettanomyces? Like, are those big concerns for you, or are they things that are acceptable?
They're not really big concerns. There definitely are concerns, but it all goes back to cleanliness is next to godliness, right? We keep it extremely clean. Each batch, we're scrubbing thoroughly our fermenters, our mash tuns, and everything that's going to come in contact with that product before it goes through its full fermentation. So we're very adamant about making sure that there are no additional variables to introduce that. So it's not. I'm not as worried with that on our rums, especially since I've yet to have a batch really go badly on me for the rum fermentations. I've had a couple whiskey fermentations go bad due to that, and that's you can always trace it back, and it's a couple $100 loss, and you dump it down the drain, and you learn from it. But so far, knock on fake wood, we've had a lot of success. So
I'm sure a lot of that variability comes to grain and all that kind of stuff.
Totally
makes sense. All right, so don't send Dan any of your sour beer barrels for him to finish any whiskey or a rum.
No, they'll be on the fire pile.
Well, thanks. I feel like totally enlightened now, and I feel like I have a whole new appreciation for the approach to just the fermentation prior to this. Is distillation of rum a difficult thing to do? Is there a difficult approach to it that's more challenging than some other spirits, or is it fairly straightforward? Anyone? Crystal, go.
I've found it to be pretty straightforward. Again, we treat.
Fair enough.
But yeah, we treat from fermentation to distillation, getting to that spirit point. We are very strict to make sure that this product ends up consistent every time. But from after that point, that's when we start to get creative in terms of, I wouldn't go so far as to say, innovative. We're not changing the world over here, but we are more playful with our flavoring side of things. So we have a seasonal coming up that's going to be a coconut chai tea combo, and so that's going to be a fun one. That's where we get a little more creative, a little more playful, but for up to distilling, even we're pretty standardized and pretty strict.
And I'll echo that. I think we're pretty standardized as well. There's not much to play with. I think I said this on last week's call as well, is that when it comes to innovation and everything, the still designs are kind of getting creative, but at the same time, that it's more of a looks thing. I think you still see the still designs being the same as they have for the past 50 plus years. And it really comes down to, the operator and their knowledge and being able to replicate that again and again. And I think, like what Crystal said, we're all very much trying to keep in that track, so we have that same consistent profile.
I got a question. So for crystalline, Dan, I'm curious at your distillation point, because from everything that I know about that, your distillation point matters a lot in terms of what your final product is gonna be. We distill our whiskey to 140 proof because we don't want to distill out all the character of the grain that we started with. So what's your distillation?
I don't know that I want to give away all my trade secrets, but I'd say I do
Okay.
have two. Yeah, I do have two electric pilot stills that can only get so hot, anyways. So I'm not really worried about overdoing it on my end.
So our first distillation will get to 65% ABV, and then we do a finishing run in a pot still and get to 80 to 82% ABV, and then proof down from there. So that's kind of our distillation profile for our rums.
Okay. Yeah.
Very cool. I thought I had a really good thing to add or to ask, and I lost
part
it.
of that.
You have another question? Go for it, Charlie. You ask the question.
Well, I mean, part of that with the distillation point goes back to the rules that surround the product, or the lack of rules that surround the product. If you're making straight bourbon, it can't be distilled any higher than 160 proof. You can't go higher than that in the distillation. You can go higher. I think with rum, as I've heard from Dan, a little more variation, and you can distill it to want in order to get the profile that you want. It's not a rule set around it.
That's right, and as long as we keep it, I can't remember if it's 90 or 95%. If we keep it below that, I'd have to go back to the regs. I never go that high with my secondary distillation anyway, but as long as you keep it below that, you're still considered a rum. So you can get a little bit higher ABV when doing the distillations on rum. Like you said, when we do our whiskey distillations, I keep it at from going above 78%, because I really do like having a little bit higher alcohol content, a lot purer product with my whiskeys when I get there. So that is my profile with my whiskey distillations, but with my rum distillations, I go even higher than that and still keep a lot of flavor.
I think the point that I was sitting on that I wanted to make sure that we shared with the audience was that we're talking about variation and consistency, and there's not necessarily a good side or a bad side to either of those words. From the perspective of production, consistency is something that any production facility is seeking. Variation is also something that means that there's something happening with the product that is going to entice you every time you approach it. And the beautiful thing about quality when you talk about consistency and variation is that as long as the expectation of you, the consumer, is met by what you're getting in the bottle, you've achieved quality, and so is the distiller. And that, I think, is the important thing to remember about the relationship, that consistency, saying, hey, we don't do open air fermentation because of consistency, or we do because we like variation, doesn't mean you're going to get a product that's going to be subpar one way or the other. They're both approaches that do certain things for the workflow of the distillery when they do certain things for the product itself.
I think that's really well said, and I think that's a great reminder for the consumer to know that there is no right or wrong approach here. We even say that the way Old Line's doing it, where they're sourcing the rum to come up from the DR, is another approach, and that's as equally a justifiable approach as making everything in-house. So we're here to support craft. We're not here to knock a procedure or a technique.
I'm always trying to give some lag now. I don't want to crush anything Charlie has to say. I feel bad. I feel like he's had to restart a couple of times now because I just jump right in there. All right, as long as we're all good.
I'm done, Jim. Now.
I just always find it fascinating that you need to define what those terms are in terms of what quality means on both sides of the transaction. There are a lot of people out there. Charlie pointed out, let's not give the captain too hard of a time, but at the same time, he also brought up Budweiser, and that's a brand that catches a lot of flack in the world of beer now because what it represents. It's this huge megalithic organization and product and all this kind of stuff. But the reality is there's not a single brewer in the world who's going to outdo Budweiser when it comes to quality. And what does that mean? It means that they're delivering on the expectation 100% of the time, because if it doesn't, that batch isn't going to get released. It's not going to ever see the light of day, and nobody will know that there was a mistake made. And I think that it's important for consumers to remember that quality only goes as far as what you expect. So if you want better, you need to expect better, and then you can let people know where your quality expectations are. And for distillers, it's the same thing. You guys are trying to deliver on the demand that you're getting from your consumer, and you're doing that. And if you're not, your doors are closed and your lights are off. So I think I'm saying all of that just to reiterate that we have great quality distilleries here in the state. And no matter what the approach, you're going to take home a bottle that says Made in Maryland that you can be proud of.
Absolutely.
I think that's a good way to end this one.
High fives.
I think I'm going to jump off the soapbox now.
I have 2 new distilleries. I'm going to come see you guys, Crystal, you and Dan. I'm going to come visit your places.
Can't wait.
It'll be an easy day trip for you. They're only about 20 minutes away from each other.
That's right.
Road trip.
All right. Crystal, Dan, Charlie, thank you everybody for joining me this afternoon. This has been a really fun talk. Crystal, tell people where they can find out more about your business.
You can find us at our website, PuertoRicoDistillery.com. Basically the same thing across also on social media, Facebook, /PR Distillery, Instagram at Puerto Rico Distillery, all spelled out. Just hashtag, Puerto Rico Distillery, and you're going to find us.
Where can people find your products right now, and what does your open availability look like with COVID?
We are, being a family business with the COVID increase, we are going back a little stricter to curbside only. So you can find us at our distillery at 1341 Hughes Ford Road, Frederick, Maryland. And so look to our website for curbside hours. And then we are at the Centerville Coast Guard Exchange and 818 Market at the new supermarket or gourmet market in Catonsville, Maryland. So we're early on in the self-distribution phase, so not too many places to pick from, but definitely curbside.
Well, that's great. Congratulations on that. Now that you're in the AFES thing, I hope you guys will get into the PX at Fort Detrick.
Working on it.
Great. Glad to hear that. If you come to Frederick, go to the airport, turn around, and directly behind you, you will see Puerto Rico Distillery. That's
Couldn't have put it better.
Nobody knows where Hughes Ford Road is, but if you go to the airport, just turn right around.
Yeah.
Dan, let everybody know how they can get in touch with Miscellaneous and what you guys are doing to allow them to come visit.
Sure thing. So MISCdistillery.com is our website. You can order for pickup. You can order for delivery. We have a few select dates for delivery coming up in, I don't know if we have them for November, but definitely for December. And then you can also order bottles to be shipped to you in the state of Maryland or DC. So just click on the, I think, shipping tab on our website. You can also find us at all 26 of the Montgomery County liquor stores. And currently this month, they are still running a 10% off all Maryland spirits. So we are included in that. So if you're in the MoCo stores, go check us out there. And we're at a handful of farmers markets and stuff, which you can email us at spirits@MISCdistillery, see if we'll be at a market near you. Also, we do pick up here if you're interested in that as well. But come check us out on Saturdays between 1 and 5 right now. Who knows how much longer we can keep that stuff going? But we do encourage you to book online, which you can also do on our website. We're keeping it to just parties of 4. So check us out and come on by and say hi.
And Charlie, Old Line's been doing some great stuff with your huge outdoor space. What can guests do to come and support you?
Yeah, that, the outdoor bar worked for us real well in the warm weather. Now that the weather's closing down, we've closed that down as well. But we do have curbside pickup. You can find us at oldlinespirits.com, all one word. Our Facebook page is pretty active. Again, Old Line Spirits for that. You can find most of our products in the liquor stores in the Baltimore, Washington, greater metropolitan area. We do have an entree into the Navy and Marine exchanges in Virginia because our guys are Navy guys, and the exchanges in Virginia don't have to follow the state rules about state store distribution. But we are kind of hemmed in between Maryland Virginia with the state stores and Pennsylvania. But we're at almost every liquor store that you would think about. And we're working into places like, like 818 Market. I live in Catonsville. I'm going to go over there this week because they had just had their grand opening, and I'll look for your stuff there, Crystal.
And that's the kind of camaraderie that we love here. Well, I want to thank all of you again for joining me this afternoon. It's been great. Everybody who tuned in to watch or will be watching this in the next couple of days or hours, thank you very much. Please show your support for these great businesses. We heard from Crystal and Dan. These are family businesses for the most part. We've got a lot of people who are out here, using all of the smarts and capabilities and ingenuity of their family backgrounds. And this is an industry that really is relying on you as a consumer. So thank you for all of your support, but please continue to support these great distilleries where you can. It's also Maryland Spirits Month, so it's always great to throw a hashtag up, MD Spirits, let everybody know that you're playing with the rest of us and that you're enjoying yourselves. And if you have any questions or comments about what's going on with the Maryland Distillers Guild, you're interested in what we're doing, check out marylandspirits.org. You've already found us on Facebook or YouTube if you're watching this, but please make sure you like, follow, subscribe, notify, do all that good stuff because we want to keep bringing you this great content and put you in front of these great makers. So thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful weekend, and we will see you after Thanksgiving. Thanks,
Jim.